Jai Hind to all. In this video lecture, we are going to discuss the design process. What are the psychology impression of the bad interface design? Okay, so let's start the user interface design process. So there are the 4 steps of user interface design process. The first step is the requirement discovery. So whenever you will start interface designing, first you have to take the requirement from the prospective customer. So prospective customer are those which are the buyer of your product or which are using your product, which are going to use your product. That is the requirement, that is the prospective customer. Okay, so based on these prospective customer, you have to do the requirement discovery. So if you do the good requirement discovery, your interface will be very good. Okay, so there is lots of changes are nothing, or small changes are there. So requirement discoveries are done based on the SRS. Okay, based on that requirement discovery, we are designing a SRS. What is SRS? Software requirement specification. So software requirement specification is a deal between the customer and the developer. So based on the requirement discovery, the client will tell you all the requirement that want in your product. Okay, so this is a deal between the users and the customer. Okay, between the client and the developer. So if at the last, if client says small changes, you just do it. If it's change all the changes, if it tell this is a completely wrong interface, so this is a contract SRS which will define that these are the requirement, and based on these requirement we developed a interface. So there is no mismatch between the client and the developer. So requirement discovery is a very important aspect in the interface design process. Okay, now we have taken all the requirement from the prospective customer, from our client. Okay, so client take the requirement from its customer. Okay, so whatever going to use your product, they tell their requirement and you do requirement discovery, and based on that requirement in discovery that comes from the prospective customer and that comes from your client, you have to build a conceptual design. Okay, so conceptual design is a site map, and based on this you will develop an initial prototype. So what is prototype? Prototype is a dummy structure which will show the design of your interface, and then we will do the review, and then we have to do the redefine here. Now conceptual designs are built and you have developed a site map, you have developed an initial prototype, and you have developed a review. Okay, you do the review, the prototype, and refine the prototype whenever necessary. So this is the second phase. Based on your requirement discovery, you will do the conceptual design. Now the dummy structure is there, initial prototype is there. So you next step is the logical and physical design. So what you do with the logical and physical design? In this prototype you developed here, you will use the UI and the visual designs. So whatever you use the user interface, whatever you want to use the user visual designs, you want to include the checkbox, you want to include the radio button, you want to include the menus. So whatever you required, you just do the logical design. Okay, and then if you do all the UI and the design process, you will do the review. Okay, review the visual design again, and if need any refinement, you do the refinement, and at last you will do the usability testing. Okay, so this is the 4 steps of the user interface design. The first step is the requirement discovery. This is a very important point, if you do the wrong requirement, ultimately your interface design will be very bad impression. Okay, so this is a very important. So based on this requirement discovery, you will build the conceptual model, and in conceptual model you will build the initial prototype, and you will review and the refine if necessary. So based on this initial prototype, you will do the logical physical design. Okay, so you will use the user interface UI and the visual designs, and you will refine and review whenever necessary, and based on that you will do the usability testing. Okay, so usability testing tells is it is usable to your customer or not, and then finally we deliver the design. Okay, then finally we deliver the design. Based on that design, our development team will develop the whole product. So the next is the steps for UI development. What are the steps? So there are basically 14 steps. Each and every steps are very important. The first step is a know your user or client. This is very similar to the requirement analysis. Okay, so if you don't know your user, your client, how you will develop a product for you, how you will make the user friendly interface to the customer. So this is a very important step, know your users or the client. And the second is the understand the business function, for which business purpose this site, this software will going to build, and what are the prospective customer, either we will able to fulfill their requirement or not. So the second step is understand the business function. And the step 3, understand the principle of good screen design. So designing, we are going to design the user interface. So what are basically basic principles of user design, of a good screen designs? All principles you have to follow for the good screen design. Okay, so there are many 7 or 8 principles of the good screen design you have to follow. Schneiderman 8 golden rule for screen design. The first step is the first is the consistency. Your product should be consistent. Okay, so in this way there are the 7 principles, golden principle we will say that, which are used for the good screen design. And the step 4 is develop system menus and navigation schemes. So system menus will navigate your product, and navigation scheme, through menu you will move, you will navigate inside your product. Suppose you have developed an AKGEC website. Okay, you will design a menus. So menus will contain the department, and the department contain the IT department, and IT department contain further activity. So this is the process, this is a protocol of navigation scheme in any good interface design. Okay, so the step 4 is develop system menus and the navigation scheme. The step 5th is select the proper kinds of window. You have to choose the proper window which are compatible to the phone, okay, and Android and Mac, etc. Okay, and the step 6 is you select the proper device based control. Proper device based control. So these are these controls are applicable on the device. Okay, suppose you have given a click and this click is not going to click, so that means these are not controls are good. Okay, you just design that control, but you don't add functionality on that control. So choose the proper screen based control. The step 8 is write clear text and messages. This is a very important, because at the first priority, okay, at the first interface you don't do all the things on the interface. You have to navigate through the websites, through your product. Okay, So at first impression, or we can say that at the interface, we have to give the clear text, simple text that is understandable to the novice also, okay, and messages so that everyone can understand. You can see in any websites there is the simple English language, not a typical language, okay, not the typical words used there, only simple text or simple messages are there. So this is very user friendly, so you have to make your interface user friendly. And the step 9 is provide effective feedback and guidance and assistance. So if the user find any problem, you have to take in the feedback and guided your product and assist your product accordingly. If you don't do that, your product will be discarded very soon. So this is a very very important aspect, that is the feedback. The step 10th is provide effective internationalizations and accessibility. So whatever you develop, whatever you design, it will be accepted by all international organizations, okay. That is, if you develop a website, that website will be going to publish internationally, even in India, even in US, even in Nepal, okay. So you have to make the effective internationalization and accessibility. You can do that just if you use a simple English language, okay, the simple words, and the simple word can understand every person, okay. And the step 11, create meaningful graphics, icons and images. So interface you can't make without icons, without images and without graphics. So these icons, these images and the graphics relate to the task we have to do, okay. Suppose there is a close button, this close button will going to close the window. So this icons is the close, okay. So whatever a copy, paste, whatever graphics you will use, that will be meaningful. And suppose you are using eraser, so there is a eraser image, that means at first impression when you see the eraser, that means that will understand by the user that it will erase your task, okay. Now the step 7th is the choose proper color. How to choose? So there is a good combination of color you have to choose, not too bright or not too light, okay. So there is a soothing color, we can say, that you have to use when you develop your user interface. And the step 13 is organized and layout window and pages. So whatever your pages, whatever your window you are going to use, it should be organized way. And the step 14 is test and retest. What is mean? So firstly you develop your user interface and then test. If you find anything that you have to recheck, you have to recorrect, then recorrect it and then finally test. So this process will going to until and unless you find any mistake in your user interface. So these are basic 14 steps for user interface development, and these are very important steps for any user interface development, okay. So any type of interface you are developing, you have to remember these 14 steps. So if one or two are missing, that will affect your interface, okay. So the next is, what are the obstacles and the pitfalls in the development path? So whenever you are developing a user interface, what are the pitfalls and what are the in the development path, okay. So designing for people. So firstly, whatever you are designing, this is designing for people. So 5 commandments we are going to remember while using the user interface. The first one is the usability. So ultimately your product is going to used by someone, these are the users. So firstly we have to check the usability of your product, of your interface. If it is usable, then it will be used by the customer, used by your prospective customer, otherwise it will going to discard. The first important comment is the usability. Okay. So, what are the sub points here? Common usability problems. So, you have to remember what are the common usability problems and some practical measures of usability, some objective measure of usability and the design team. So, let us discuss one by one the common usability problem, practical measures of usability and the objective measures of usability, and ultimately the design team. So, let us discuss the obstacle and pitfall in the development path. The first obstacle is the nobody ever get its right the first time. Whenever you are build first time your interface, nobody will ever get its right, because you have to follow the 14 step. If 1, 2 or 3 or more than 3 are missing, that will you are lacking. Okay. So, you have to do the step number 14. You have to do the test and then recorrect and then test and then recorrect. So, this is the first obstacle and the pitfall in the development path, that nobody ever gets its right with the first time. And the next obstacle is the good design require living in a sea of changes. Here you are able to find the screen which is very much messy. Okay. So, this is not an example of a good interface. Not everything you put on the first interface. This will be messy, this will be problem for you, for users to find what is required. Okay. So, this is not a good design. So, you have to just place the necessary thing, okay, the primary things on the first interface, and the secondary things you have to navigate through the websites, okay, through the software. And the third pitfall is making contrast to ignore changes will never eliminate the need of changes. So, whatever you develop user interface, you not satisfy your client anymore. So, that is why we are making an SRS, software requirement specification, that is the deal between the customer, between the client and the developer. Because if you are going to one change, it will affect the two changes also. If you are going to correct these two changes, it will affect the another 3 changes. So, making contracts to ignore change will never eliminate the need of changes. Okay. So, that is why we are making the contract, so that the small changes can be eliminated, which are never eliminated with the need of your client. And the next is, even if you have made the best system humanly possible, people will still making mistakes when using it. So, you are suppose you are making a very good design, okay, very good interface you are building. So, someone knows will visit your website, visit your product, visit your software, and he or she is not able to navigate, or he or she will not able to understand your interface. That means you are not lacking. Okay. So, even if you are, that is the fourth pitfall, you are making a good, you are making your best, okay, you have making the best system. So, it may be possible people will still make mistakes when using it. Okay. So, this is the another pitfall in the development process. Designer need good tools. If you are using good tools, your interface will be good. Okay. Suppose we have taken example, we have to design an graphics. Okay. So, there are the 2 tools. First you use the Canva and the second use the Figma. So, Canva basically use the slideshow. Okay. You just as slides you have to change the frame. So, Canva is able to do just picking the frames and just put that, and the Figma is able to do the frames and whatever designing you want, whatever template you want. So, if you are going to use Canva, it will difficult because you are not using a good tool for a graphic design, but if you are use a Figma, it will a better designer, okay, better tool for a designer. So, it's very much important for a designer what are the good tools for designing your graphics. So, next pitfall is that in the development of user interface, you must have behavioral design goals like performance design goals. Suppose you are making a very good interface, but its performance is very poor, technical background is very poor, so it will discard by the customer very quickly. So, you have to make behavioral design goals so that performance will not affect the design. Okay. So these are the basically what we have do. This is what we have read in the previous slides. These are common in the one slide. So, the first we have studied that nobody ever gets it right for the first time, and development is chock full of surprises. If you are going to change one thing and ultimately changes are made in the two more things, okay, and the good designs require leaving a sea of changes. So, one changes affect the other changes. Designers need good tools, and the performance design goals you have to remember, and the people may make mistake while using a good systems also. So, these are basically obstacles and the pitfall in the development path. So, next, so these are the common pitfall we studied in the previous slides. So, let us revise. No early analysis and understanding the user's needs and expectations. This is the common pitfall. A focus on using design feature on component. Okay. So, if you are not early analysis and understand the user need and expectation, that means you don't do the requirement discovery. That is the most important pitfall in any user interface design. And the next one is a focus on using design features of component. All your focus is going to use the design, okay, whatever the designs or features, whatever the design will going to component, okay, whatever the navigation process, whatever the features, whatever the technicality behind this design, that will lacking. That is again a common pitfall. And the no usability testing. So, that means you made a user interface very time consumingly, okay, you have to take it 1 month or 7 days suppose, but you don't do the usability testing to the users. So, how you find it is usable or not to your customer? So, if this is not usable from your customer, that means it was going to discard very soon. So, usability testing is very important for any interface designing. And the next one is no common design team visions. That means there is poor communication between the team. So, suppose there are 3 members, okay, and 3 members are going to design the different interface, different icons, different images. There is no vision. So, if team don't have no vision, then why users have the common visions, okay. So, this is the common pitfall again. Next is designing for people, the 5 commitment. The first is gain a complete understanding of users and their tasks. If you don't do that, if you don't do the requirement analysis, so that means there is a wide gap in technical ability, their goals and their attitudes. If there is a gap, that means a failure that means your product is going to discard very soon. And the second is, if you don't understand the users and their tasks, a failure to understand the difference will the product or system to failure. Why your product or system will failure? Because you don't do the users understanding, you don't gain the right requirement from the user. The next one is the solicit early and ongoing user involvement. So whenever you are making a product, suppose you are developing a product in 1 month, so for every second day or third day you must involve your client, so that the client will able to find whatever will happen. Okay, and if they find anything mismatch, so at timely you can correct it. So involving the users in design from the beginning provide a direct conduit of the knowledge they possess about their jobs, their task and the needs. Okay, if you don't do that, at last several changes you have to make in your user interface. So it is a good practice for involving user in ongoing development. Designing for people. Okay, so perform rapid prototyping and the testing, because you are designing for people. So people will tell it is good or not. So that's why you have to perform the rapid prototyping and the testing. And prototyping means, if initial prototype, then retest, and finally if there need any changes you have to improve the prototype, and modify and iterate the design as much as necessary. If necessary, then modify it at timely. And the third is integrate the designs of all the system components. So when you integrate, you can able to see how your product is going to show to the customer, perform. Ultimately you find the performance of the interface. Next is usability. Checkers in 1991 simply define usability as the capability to be used by humans, but should be easily and effective. So what is easily here? To a specified levels of subjective assessment. That's it. It should be easily understood by the user, and effectively to a specified level human performance. Effectively deals with the performance, and the easily means how easy to your customer. So this is the user experience versus usability. So usability gives you the effectiveness of your product, efficiency of a product, learnability of product, error prevention and memorability. And the user experience will give the satisfaction, will give the enjoyment, pleasures, fun, value. Okay, so this is all about the users. What is the usability? Means how effective, how efficient, how error free the product is, and user experience will give the satisfaction, enjoyment, pleasures, fun, value, etc. So user testing and usability testing. So user testing means, if you are going to launch, so before that you are launch at a site where 100 to 200 people will use, and they tell the weakness, they tells the requirement that you have to add. Okay, and the usability testing, can users use my app? If he or she able to use my app, that means how user friendly you made your interface. So common usability problems are ambiguous menu and icons. Okay, names, the icons, labels is something and the task is something, so that will convert into the ambiguity. Language that permit only single direction. Okay, and movement through a system. Complex linkage that is not able to understand by the users, how to navigate to your product. Okay, inadequate feedback. If there is a lack of feedback, that means your usability, that is the usability problem. Lack of system anticipation, you don't anticipate the customer, the users, are inadequate error message. Okay. So, what are the irritating characters in a user interface design? So, visual clutter, that means your interface is not looking very good, that is not clear, impaired information readability, the information that is given, that is half, not full, that is partial information you are going to deliver. Incompressive components, okay, components whatever you use in an interface, that is incompressive. Annoying distraction, it will distract the user, it will confusing navigations. Inefficient operations, whatever operation that is inefficient, and the inefficient page scrolling, and the information overload. So, in this video you understand what is the design process, how many steps we are going to use in any design and in any user interface design. Okay, what are the comments, 5 comments, and what are the irritating characters, what usability test versus user testing. Okay, so hope you will like the video. Thank you so much.